we are recording.
I'd like to welcome you on INNOVER-EAST Webinar dedicated to energy efficient data centers. And my name is Andrei Somov. I'm a senior researcher at GreatNet Research Center. And actually, I would like also to introduce our speaker, Giovanni Giuliani from Hewlett-Packard Italy Innovation Center. Giovanni is a technical coordinator of DC4Cities project on data centers, and he actually has been technical coordinator for another projects on data centers, the projects such as Fit for Green and All for Green. And Giovanni has a wide experience and strong background in data centers, in efficient data centers, and currently he's a master architect at Hewlett-Packard in Italy Innovation Center. So we can start, and just a few reminders for you. So please mute your microphones to avoid the noise during the webinar. Ask you to prepare questions, and ask them after the lecture. So we start, and Giovanni,
okay,
please.
Great. With this webinar, and thanks, Andrei, for inviting me to present this experience we had with this project to INNOVER-EAST, and thank GreatNet and Europe Alliance for Innovation for this setup. As Andrei already said, my name is Giovanni Giuliani. I work in HP Italy, and today I will present to you the DC4Cities project. It's one of the last Framework Program 7 project in the context of a smart cities goal. So it's a project around data center energy in the context of smart city, and it's a very interesting link between these two things: smart cities and ecologically, environmentally sustainable data center. So, and we will definitely explore this link in the context of a presentation. But as Andrei said, this project has origins some years ago. We started in 2009 to prepare some proposals that have been accepted by the European Commission during 3 different Framework Program 7 calls. The first one was related to a project aiming to save energy inside the data center by performing dynamic consolidation of virtual machine and simply turning off the servers that were not used. This was the basic idea of Fit for Green project. We started this in 2010, and we completed the project in 2012, and Andrei was part of this project. That's where we have been working together. The idea was interesting and gave good results. So we decided to make another step forward, and we started in November 2011 a new project called All for Green, where we were trying to exploit the benefit of having green service level agreement, flexible service level agreement, providing a data center a certain set of flexibility, and utilize this flexibility on one side to save energy in general, on the other side to help the energy provider during peak times in order to avoid the energy provider to go into crisis mode, therefore either to pollute or because when the energy provider is in peak mode, they need to use fast urgency energy sources like diesel generators that pollute a lot, or on the other most catastrophic scenario, to have a blackout, and sometimes happen. So, in order to avoid the energy provider to manage this emergency situation, the data center could exploit the flexibility and help to avoid, in the context of a global collaboration between all elements inside the ecosystem, in order to avoid this situation and create a better environment. That's basically the origin for the name. All together, all this collaboration between all components inside the ecosystem. Finally, we started September 2013 a new project called DC4Cities. So a data center that is eco-friendly enough to be a participant into the smart city scenario. And here we want to adapt the consumption of a data center to the availability of renewable energy. The more renewable energy you have, the more the data center can work and utilize the power. When there are few energy available, the data center should try to minimize its consumption. We took inspiration from HP Labs' Net Zero project in California, and from the Parasol project carried out together by the University of Barcelona and the University on the East Coast in the US. So are our origins. And the project I will be talking today is, again, I repeat, DC4Cities and Smart City goals. Cities need to distinguish themselves from other cities because they offer special services to the citizens, and they optimize the execution of their process so that they reduce the amount of resources they use to provide the services to citizens and to process they execute inside the city. I'm not talking explicitly on IT processes, but also garbage collection, traffic, etc. are processes managed by the city, and this process can be optimized through the usage of IT. So here, the smart city has a large dependency on IT in order to deliver IT services, good IT services to the citizens, and to optimize their other physical services. So smart city typically should tend to use IT and therefore data centers more than other cities. As a problem, the more you use data center, the more power consumption you have. So it might have a negative side effect in terms of resource usage and pollution. That's the reason why the EU, in this goal, was seeking for data center with smaller environmental impact in order to meet the objectives of the smart city in terms of sustainability. Because cities themselves, from the services they provide, but also for the quality of the life that is strictly related to the quality of the environment where the city is located. They're interested in having environmental sustainable data centers, and they can prove the effectiveness of from the environmental standpoint using specific metrics that currently don't exist. Therefore, we are working also on the idea to create new metrics, the energy efficiency of the data centers. And we'll talk later on about them as well. But let's go back to the basic concept of the project. The data center needs to become somehow energy adaptive. Need to know what is the availability of renewable energy and to try to adapt its own power consumption to that availability. And moreover, if a smart city has special requests for the data centers in terms of energy, because the smart city has an authority that is coordinating the usage of the energy inside all domains of a smart city, this directive needs to be accepted and the data center needs to be adapted again also with respect to this constraint arising from the smart city. So look at the bottom left picture. And that the yellow surface represents the renewable power, for instance, arriving from a set of solar panels dedicated to the data center, the power available only during the day. A data center that has more or less flat consumption with some variation during the day will be able to utilize in the best possible way the renewable power. If you look at the consumption, you can guess that 50% of the data center consumption, the bottom line, comes from renewable and 50% comes from the grid without the help of this renewable, because the economy is drawn when renewables is not available. On the right-hand side graph, you see that there is a peak of consumption of the data center, the green curve, that is in sync with the maximum of renewable power. So the data has been adapting itself and in sync with renewables, and at the end of the day, it will have 80% of consumption covered by renewable power. This in two pictures, the situation and what we would like to do in project. Try to shift our peak in sync with the availability of renewable power. At the end of the presentation, if you want to go and take a look at our website, you will find a lot of documents and additional information. The website name is www.dc4cities.eu. And here below you see the logos of the partners participating to DC4Cities project. Obviously, HP is there, is a big industry. On the left-hand side, FreeMind, a small and medium company in Belgium focused with management systems and especially oriented with to renewable energy. The coordinator is in FreeMind. Then we have on the left, on the right, two universities, Mannheim and Passau in Germany. Left on the second row, we have CreateNet in Trento, participating to the project, together with INRIA on the right-hand side, in Nice area, Research Institute. CES in Barcelona, and it's a data center providing services to the university in Spain. INRIA is a large research center in Italy that has a special interest in renewable energies. Gas Natural Fenosa is actually an energy provider in Spain that it has generation both from traditional fuels as well as a big plant of aeolic production and some photovoltaic. Last, in this introduction, Barcelona municipality on the right-hand side of the HP logo, because the city of Barcelona itself is participating to the project in two ways. It offers one of its own data center to participate as the trial together with HP and CESUC ones, but it's to represent also the smart city as an authority and coordinator of this kind of energy management activity. So, having inside the project one of the most active cities to be the European representatives of smart cities is definitely a good plus for this project. Take a look at the project itself, the technological part here. Basically, I said we want to have a data center that you see in the middle crawls, so we developed a controller for data center in the picture, this controller wants to adapt the consumption of a data center to the availability of renewable resources. So it needs to know what is the current component of the production of the energy and what is the forecast for, let's say, for the next day in terms of production, availability of renewable energies locally produced or from the grid. And it needs also to interface the smart city to receive the direction on how and when to use energy. This controller will have an interface that we call a renewable energy adaptive interface, the green bar at the top, through which it will talk to grid and providers of energy and to the smart city to retrieve the information that become the guidelines, the guiding principle in order to tune the consumption of data center. But the consumption of a data center is the consumption of the computers and the other equipment in data centers. Computer will run a different kind of application. The idea is to tune the execution of the application, but use IT resources, computer network, etc., and tune the execution and use the minimal amount of equipment necessary to fulfill the job and try to use the maximum resources only when we have the peak of renewable energies. Otherwise, try to minimize. And that's the reason why we have this about the bottom or in the central part of the picture lower than the data center, interfacing through the energy adaptive data center operational interface, the control module for the different software. Project, we have a work package dedicated to the scenarios and especially concentrating on the top part of this picture. We have 3 different technological research work package, one dedicated to the controller work package 3 in the center, one dedicated to the elements that will provide information related to the energy force and the energy usage constraint, that is work packet 4, and work packet 5 in the bottom that will orchestrate the execution of a different software component in line with the direction received by the controller. It is dedicated to the free trials, where we'll try to implement as much as possible of this large scenario presentation in real cases. And we have later on a little set about the trials. Getting from the picture to a bit more schematic view, what we do on the per interface, the renewable energy forecasting interface that we also called northbound interface, because we consider the northbound system the one where energy is produced, and constraint with respect to energy are generated. We expect to have some kind of connectors that will allow DC4 system to collect information and forecast about the energy power from the energy provider. Currently, most, I would say, some of the energy providers in Europe export this data in almost real time. There is a website in UK where you can connect and have and receive every 5 minutes the production of the energy in UK. There are other services like this in Spain. Countries, not all the providers have this almost real-time data. Anyway, the connection, the details, how the information is structured, depends on different providers. So we created this kind of connectors that will go and have the ability to retrieve the data and convert them into a unified format. in connector is not available, we have to try to make forecast even if we don't have the provider of this data. Let's think at a set of solar panels installed on top of the roof of the center. Locally installed, directly connected. There's no providing us the information about the forecast of how much they will produce during the day, today and tomorrow. But the production of solar panels might be strictly related to the weather forecast. We have created connectors to this environmental data, and we try to correlate to create a local forecaster data to provide, nevertheless, the forecast for the next day. Again, cold of cold. We'll therefore utilize this forecasting interface for all the possible data, direct or indirect. Sure, we would be very happy that this interface becomes a standard, and therefore the provider will directly use this interface standardized to provide data as represented by the yellow dot arriving to our system. Story for the bound interface. Current software is controlled by automation tool, monitoring and IT automation tool, but the software is not energy aware. They have created some controllers to utilize the monitoring and automation capability of the software application and services to control their behavior. If it becomes a standard, we will standardize this approach and make this interface ubiquitously available on the different software packages and services. Something like NTP applied to or with energy concept, just to provide a rough idea. Let's make a tour, or try to make a tour inside our system to see how we work with this information. And we connect to the smart grid or the grid, and we retrieve the first graph that is on the left-hand side, data that is this kind of graphs. So the energy availability forecast based on the different fuels, the energy sources. In this picture, for instance, in green is the portion from solar panels, then the eolic is in light blue, then we have gas and coal. There are renewables, gas and coals are not. If we do a couple of maths, you'll end up computing the REN percent, the renewable percent of the grid. And based on amount of sun and wind compared to gas and coal, the renewable percent will vary hour by hour during the day. Solar panels that we might have on the top of the roof, we can take a look at the weather forecast, solar irradiation, and an estimate about the power that will produce by the solar panel. We might receive a goal to stay at 80% of renewable. Consider this our target for our optimizations. Information, the will compute a sort of ideal maximum of ideal power consumption curve that will fulfill requirements based on the availability of energy for different providers. This total amount of power will be split, use special splitting policies, into amount of power that each one of the service running inside the data center will utilize. Let's services B and C, yellow and red, are applications that needs to run the day and produce a certain amount of work. For create some reports or convert videos, a certain amount of videos, while a service like the blue one is the one that is always up and running, for instance, running a site. It will receive its own quota for the execution. Now, at this point, there is a very important step. That service, the controller of a service, will need to tune the execution of the service itself in order to have a consumption of the question of IT resources used in order to implement the service. And the consumption of this IT resources, computer, network, etc., needs to have the shape and the value expressed in these plans. This is not so easy to do. Therefore, to give you one example of how it can be accomplished. For example, that your application needs to scan or process 20,000 files. The work to do that the application needs to do every day. It can do 20,000 reports. There can be files to be converted to one format into another. So you have 20,000 of these files to process. You have different options. An option to do the work. You, for instance, utilize 5 machines. Another example could be you have this amount of files to scan for virus, so you can have 5 antivirus machines running in parallel. You can process 10,000 files per hour. So 20,000 files to do. 5 machines, you can concentrate the work in only 2 hours. And that's meaning of the first graph top right. Alternative, instead of using 5 servers, you could use 2 servers only. In that, you will be able to process only 4,000 files per hour, but you need to take 5 hours. As an alternative, we would see you have in 1 hour using only 1 machine, then for 2 other hours you use 2 machines, and for yet another hour you use 5 machines. In a way, the usage of resources will be different during the time, and you will have a different shape of your curve. So you organize the physical machines or the virtual machines in order to produce the amount of work you need to do during the day based on your service level agreement is working mode. You can have very aggressive working mode like in case A, or a flat, almost flat distribution like B, or varying working mode with peaks and periods where you use low resources. So, this flexibility, this different possibility, the controllers of the software running in the data center, each controller will create a set of alternative plans, option plans, that try to match the budget in terms of energy they have received. And on the other side, we'll try to make sure the service level agreement are respected. Options that try to approximate the budget, the energy budget, but also have some exception. They are not all 100% compliant, but are try to tend to have the shape of budget they have received. And the possible alternatives are all returned by controllers. They are aggregated by an optimizer that will select the best possible combination of all the proposals received by the energy adaptive software controller by the single combination that will try to be as similar as possible to the maximum ideal power consumption, the total one, and will respect the constraint from the smart city administrator. One solution to this big complex problem has been found. It will be shared and visible from the data center energy administration from the dashboard of the system, as well as from the smart city administration, at least summary, so that the smart city can have a view on how good the data center has been in respecting the guidelines and the constraint about energy usage. Tour about how our controller is working. Sometimes it will be easy to respect the goals. Sometimes it will be harder. Sometimes maybe there might be also exception in case action cannot be achieved. We measure exactly the effectiveness of our controller. In the literature, most known and sometimes also used metrics related to data center is PUE, power usage effectiveness, which is not a very good metric, in my opinion, for the window of optimization. The P is the ratio between the total power consumption of the data center and the power consumption of the IT equipment inside the data center. So, total center including air conditioning, UPS, lights, etc., come to how much it's spent by the computer themselves. The closer this value, the ratio is to 1, the better. So, the ratio that was well over 2 to the 5. And so there was a lot of overhead spent by the air conditioning and UPS to the amount of energy spent by the computers. Modern data center have a PUE of 1.25 or even lower. The world record is around 1.15, 1.2. These are very good optimized data center. Anyways, they always measure only the overhead of the air conditioning, the facility, compared to consumption of the computer. They were concerned in this metric and in many other metrics what the center is doing in terms of work. Also for normal people, it would be very important to understand, like with the cars, what is work done by the data center divided by the power spent in order to do that work. If advertisement of the cars think about the consumption, the fuel consumption, how many kilometers you do with 1 liter of your fuel, how much emission you generate each kilometer you do. So they compare the work done, the useful work done for you, move from one place to another, to the consumption or the energy that has been spent by that specific car. We are proposing to do the same. Try to understand what is the work done by the data center and how much energy is produced. Sometimes in the newspaper, you see articles saying Google data center is consuming X watts for each search that the user do all around the world. There has been a recent study by a French research agency for energy, how much it costs in terms of energy and in terms of emission sending out emails. That kind of things we are interested in. How much does a web server, a website consume for each web request, for each web page? If we have such a metric, we can try to different data centers, and we can bring awareness to the users so that when you will buy your own website from a web service provider, you ask, how much are you consuming? How much are you emitting for 100,000 pages on the website? And you could also select based on price, for sure, and also for kind of emission or energy perspective, the best and most effective service. They want to investigate, and we are a bit ahead of what the typical standards do. Next, we are collaborating inside the cluster of different projects, research projects from the EU, working on data center energy optimization, all together working in making standardization proposal for new metrics to the European standardization groups. Working with the grid, which is more advanced on this kind of topics, and it's a very important topic for us. About trial, because time is going on, we have one in Trento with an application related to health that is generating reports for an health system, and the application is located in Trento. In Bologna, we have a very nice application that is inside Suzuki, is offering services to Catalonia, basically. It's the cultural inheritage system for Catalonia. They collect all the web contents related to Catalonia, they convert it into a common format, they store it and redistribute it to the web, so that whatever event happened in Barcelona or has happened in the past will always be stored in this central system. And we have in Milan at the HP site, we have a site where we have put solar panels on top of the roof. We have a special hardware at very low power consumption, and we are running a web application, a worldwide application for e-learning, the web interface. So 3 different kind of applications. I talk a bit about ours because it's probably the most complete set. We have solar panels on top of the roof, only 8 solar panels for kilowatts. We have an external provider for the night, and we have deployed a complex application, quite complex, sophisticated application on a set of moonshot servers. Moonshots are one of the newest hardware at low consumption. They are radically different from the traditional server because they have been designed with power consumption in mind. This is like the one on this picture, but is the one that we installed in our site when we did the kickoff. I took this picture. And if this board horizontally placed on top, these are the cartridges. One is one server. Made of low power consumption servers, slightly lower than the breed, but they are very efficient. And also, this cartridges can contain up to 45 servers, have special things in order to save energy. They put what is possible in common so that each server is really streamlined and all the fan, power supply, etc. are optimized and shared by all cartridges. Just to give you an example what it means to use this instead of a traditional system, AG.com website serving 300 million hits per day, 3 million web pages per day, was of 46 legacy servers in data center in US and was consuming 115 kilowatts. 115 kilowatts, 4 million hits per day. It's nice to make a comparison. 300 million hits per day divided by 115 kilowatts it's the kind of metrics we are interested in. Now, all websites have been migrated to Moonshot system. There are 6 Moonshot chassis, and total power consumption is 6 kilowatt. 6 kilowatts compared to 115, and still performing exactly the same work. The million hits per day are covered with the same response time. So 94% less power consumption. That's the reason why I say it's radically different. And we have installed this on our site. It may be, why are we talking about a learning application? Because it happens that we are managing this service worldwide for HP. It's a platform web-based with over 1 million students connected. We are deploying the production machines on 3 different clouds all over the world. We took the application running on these 3 different clouds, and we have put them in 15 different cartridges. That's exactly what HP.com does with its own web servers. We did with this e-learning application. So we have put this inside our trial, powered with the solar panels that you see the pictures of the 8 solar panels on top of the roof, the inverter, on the right-hand side the controllers, the Moonshot, and one screenshot of the output of the solar panel controller. You see that was a quite good day, and the yellow portion, the yellow surface is the production of the solar panels. The green colored one is the power consumed by the Moonshot from the solar panel. The red portion is when sun was not available, we were drawing power from the grid. With 8 solar panels on top of our roof, we have been saving 1.5 tons of CO2 emission in 1 year. If you want to have an idea of the CO2 impact. This is the last slide where I recap the trial results with the power production of PVs under different kind of days, and we found common patterns. And here on the left hand side on the top graph, you see the typical 5 representative of typical days, production good ones and also not so good ones. On the right hand side, you see that we're running our application. The application was the application of HP Life system in baseline mode, meaning with all on the Moonshot, and the red line is the consumption, the total consumption of the Moonshot running heavy workload for this web e-learning application. The yellow surface is the production of the solar panels. The green surface is the rent and the renewable percent of the grid in Italy for that same day. You see that it's varying hour by hour. The picture represents 24 hours, so you can have a very good view on what we did. The red line is the consumption of the application as is our baseline. By utilizing the optimizations of DC4Cities, the total consumption was the line that you see below the red line. The red and blue line match in the top consumption peaks when there is a lot of load. When there is less load, we solve some of the Moonshots that are not necessary, and therefore we save energy. Metric, our REN percent, the renewable percent, improved between, let's say, 4 and 6%, depending on the kind of day. One is a very good day, so it was 6%. On less favorable weather condition, we still improved by 4% our renewable percent. Power consumption was reduced about 13%. Efficiency of the service we deliver in terms of web page request per watt improved between 12 and 16%, depending on the different days, the profile days that we have been shown on the top left. Once successful for phase 1, we plan to get even better number for phase 2. Just for your information, this 15 cartridges plus 2 load balancers that we used consumed in total 500 watt. 500 watt is the average consumption of 2 LED servers. He had 17 physical machines. So you can understand, very important for this trial with only 8 solar panels to have servers that don't consume much energy. Otherwise, this contribution of a solar panel would not be enough for the servers. But for moonshots, 17 moonshots were powered very well by only 8 solar panels. That presentation, Andrea will tell you to see if there are any questions.
Okay, nice presentation. I think it is very interesting. So, does anybody have questions? Okay, question regarding local renewable energy providers. So I'm just curious, we are interested to, have long contracts with the data centers because they are not assured that they can provide enough for a long period of time, and whether this business is already on the market or not.
Interesting point, because if you are small and you are giving energy to such a critical service like the data center, then you be a bit scared of this kind of contract. What I've noticed is that typically data center don't take the risk to get only one provider. They hold even data centers that are not connected to a provider, but in general, some of them make 2 contracts with 2 separate grids, or as an the UPS and the emergency generators. Notice is that some data centers are trying to make a contract with small local provider as an additional power supply, not the main. And not being the only provider, local provider, not being the only one, makes it easier. Because they will be the preferred one where you have power. But if they don't have enough power, they will not break the system because there will be a secondary power provider. I've seen evidence of some data centers and in Bologna. We have solar panels through a local provider, some wind turbines, little ones, not big ones, and make a contract with a provider that will give you 100% renewable energy. Obviously, will be not in real time, but the average, like the green tariffs and green certificates. With optimization to use maximum renewal in real time, doing the average over the day. Nevertheless, they go to generate that amount of production from real. In this way, by using 2 different suppliers at the time, they can reach very good numbers.
Okay, I see. Any questions from the audience? I have one more question. Well, I remember there were hot discussions regarding the exploitation of nuclear energy, because for example in France they have pretty many nuclear plants. And the question is, do you deal with this kind of energy, or you do not consider it as a green type of energy in this project?
We took the position that we do not count nuclear as renewable. It's a convention, because as you remember from the slide, let me go back quickly to the slide where we had we receive the graph you see on the left hand side, the numbers for this graph, and we compute how much of this is renewables or not. We not consider nuclear as renewable. And therefore, in our computation, we count on other kind of energy sources. In France, there's still a lot of nuclear production. I think this depends on your ecological sensitivity to either it in one category or in the other. Most of the people in this project have a strong attitude for environment, etc., and so don't like to match the nuclear production. Therefore, we try to make to do the best we can without using it. But it's a conventional. I agree with you. Yeah. It's a convention. For us, is yet another source of energy. Since at the end we take all the sources and we categorize as renewables or non-renewables, we do not consider them as renewable. But it depends on for the optimizer, etc. It's irrelevant.
Perhaps for participants, it would be interesting, just for the sake of curiosity, what type of ambient energy is the cheapest one, let's say, solar or wind?
Well, we have got also an interesting question. Do you think that at the end of the day, you buy solar panels instead of a grid? Will the data centers spend more? Become more renewables? Or
well, it's a tricky question, because the equipment...
It's a very tricky question. And when in some countries there are tariffs that change the price of the energy based on the hours. Spain, energy costs for big consumers like data center, energy costs less during the night compared to during the day. At the end of the day, if we try to use more energy during the day because there is the sun, spending more, or and so we are also trying to make this kind of evaluation, and there are metrics related to the economical impact. But there are two ones. One that is related only to the consumption and the tariffs of the energy based on this optimization to see whether we don't incur an extra cost. There are even more complex ones where they look at investment. How much does it cost to put solar panels and utilize them for free? And we are also considering inside the cluster of the standardization, the kind of metrics are also considered. So we take prices also in consideration.
Another problem lies in equipment, and the problem is from technical point of view, because you cannot sometimes directly, provide renewable energy to the load, and therefore you need to store it somewhere. And if you store it, of course, there are some leakage currents, and you also waste the energy. This is also considered.
The storage technology was not so mature when we planned for this project. Is becoming more and more interesting, and this kind of optimizer might very interesting contribution. That might be a good topic for a next project, I guess. How to store storage in the best possible way.
So, because there are like supercapacitors and batteries, and you should find a trade-off between leakage current and, of course, a number of cycles to charge and discharge the storage. Yeah,
it's a good topic for a follow-up project.
So perhaps I will join you again. We'll see.
Definitely.
Hey, does anybody have a question, technical one, or just curiosity? If there are no questions, I would like to thank Giovanni and Hewlett-Packard for this interesting presentation and webinar, and thank you for answering questions. If participants have questions, perhaps we'll ask you in offline mode.
We'll collect this question and then, like another, then by mail with you.
Yeah, okay, Giovanni. I think we can stop recording.
There is a question in the chat, probably.
Yes, regarding when the webinar will be put online. Oh, well, I hope it will be online within 1 or 2 weeks.